Hello and welcome to a Project Cars 2 multiplayer video where we have coverage of me competing in the Apex Online Racing Endurance League back in Season 4, which was back at the tail end of last year. So it's been a while, or shall I say it's taken me a while to actually get round to putting these up on the channel, but they have been a long time coming. And yeah, this is the first round of that championship and we're at Monza. The championship actually consisted of 8 rounds in total, but I only ended up competing in 6 of those rounds, so this is going to be the first of a 6-part series effectively, and this is just the qualifying session for this opening round, and we're just building up to the flying lap that I did that got my fastest time, which got me to my starting grid position for the race. So the car that I'm competing in for the season is the Toyota TSO 50 LMP1 car from the Spirit of Le Mans DLC. Just coming out of the final turn now and deploying a load of the hybrid energy just to accelerate ourselves up to a higher top speed on the approach to turn 1, just navigating our way past some traffic coming out of the pit lane. And we get very hard on the brakes at the 150 metre board down into first gear. Fortunately that Porsche decided to take across the chicane, so it wasn't going to impede me there. Using all the hybrid that I had recharged into the braking for turn 1 and getting ourselves up to about 280 kilometers an hour. So we're coming through and preparing ourselves for the second chicane just after the bridge. Again, braking, shifted down into second gear, avoiding the large sausage curbs on either side, and then using a short squirt of the hybrid as we come up to the first of the 2 Lesmos. Chuck it in fourth gear, just hope that the car sticks, use the downforce. Good smooth run there. Now into the second Lesmo, again down into fourth gear, not run out too wide, and then use all of the hybrid that we have available in our current hybrid charge. So now coming down underneath the bridge, underneath the old oval section, and up towards Ascari, braking at the 100 metre board, down into fourth gear, not taking too much curb on the inside, just catching the curb a little bit awkwardly there on the right, which means the exit isn't going to be quite as good as I'd like it to be, using the remainder of the hybrid there. And as you can see, my fuel load is getting pretty low, down 0.3 of a litre as we come into the parabolic of the final turn, chucking in fourth gear, getting hard on the accelerator, coming out the exit using the remainder of the hybrid charge. You can see that I'm a second up on my previous best, and as we come approaching towards the start finish line, I run out of fuel. So immediately jump onto the clutch and just let the car coast in across the start finish line. And you may have just seen that I improved by about 0.3 of a second, which was good enough to put me 5th position overall, right in behind my teammate Warren Tyre for the beginning of this opening race. And you can see the sector splits there as well, and the times that the other drivers did. Probably would have been about 6-7 of a second quicker if I hadn't ran out of fuel. So I could have been ahead of my teammate, possibly up in and around Lucas with that 127.9. So here we go then, just forming up on the grid. It's going to be a 2-hour race, and we will not be going on the green light. At AOR, we do our own manual formation lap, and basically what we do, as you can see, remain stationary for about 5 seconds or so, and then the drivers will pull away one by one, and we shall form up into a single file formation. And we'll be driving around at pretty much a maximum of around about 120 kilometers an hour, which is 80 miles an hour. You're allowed to do some weaving and a little bit of light brake work just to try and maintain the temperature in both the tyres and also the brakes, but you can't brake anything too excessively or do anything too excessive that could be deemed dangerous for the other drivers. And once we get to a certain point around the track, we shall form up into a 2x2 formation where the speeds will drop a little bit further down to 80 kilometers an hour and 50 miles an hour. And then as we come towards the start finish line, we basically pass a fairly recognizable point on the start finish line before the start finish straight, and any time between that predetermined point, which all the drivers will know about, and the actual start finish line itself, the race leader can put his foot down in one smooth motion to signify the start of the race, and from that point we go racing. The race leader cannot feint that start. He cannot go and then brake hard or lift off the accelerator. Once he puts his foot down and it's quite clear that he's accelerating, that is basically the signal for all the other drivers to go racing. And obviously with these LMP1 hybrid cars, we do also have the hybrid charge to deploy at the beginning of the race as well. But like I said, it's a 2-hour race. Obviously, this formation lap does count in towards that 2-hour race, so we're kind of obviously trying to not use up too much fuel on this formation lap. Try and save and harvest as much of the fuel as possible. Well, not really harvest, but just try and save as much of the fuel as possible for the actual races, so we can try and extend our race stints. As the Toyota has a slight disadvantage to the Audi R18. The Audi R18 has 15 extra horsepower produced from the engine, so it has a natural straight line speed advantage, but us Toyotas have a bigger fuel tank and do also have more hybrid energy to use on a per lap basis than the Audis do, although that doesn't really come into effect until we get to a big track like Le Mans, so it's not really an issue here. But you can see us moving into our 2x2 formation now, ready for the beginning of this race. And we're just settling in. I'm just trying to build a little bit of heat in the brakes, ready for turn 1, stay relatively close to the guys in front. I am also using the TrackIR 5, which will allow me to look around, double check the mirrors and stuff, but just waiting for that signal from the race leader to actually go racing. And there it is, so we're accelerating away, using a little bit of the hybrid as we get the run down towards turn 1, but I'm not going to use too much of it because I want to try and save some of it for the first couple of opening laps. So immediately I'm losing some positions, but both my teammate and also Nunu, I believe it is, which is the Audi in front of us, have gone a little bit deep into the first chicane. It seems like one of the Porsches has some trouble as well. So with that, I'm going to pick up a couple of positions. Nunu's managed to, well, he's held on and retained the position that he gained on me at the start, but Lucas has gone and dropped in behind. So now in 4th position as Nunu goes and loses the rear of the car and spins out in front of me. So now I'm in 3rd position and looking in a pretty prime spot, so up 2 places overall from the beginning of the race. As you can see, we're in pretty dark conditions with the night kind of lurking in and around at the moment. Just basically just trying to find a little bit of space, trying to find the rhythm and settle into this pretty long endurance race. You can see the front 2 drivers, Endless and Berserker, have already checked out a little bit, got a little bit deep there in the Ascari chicane, so it made the right-hander a little bit more difficult than I would have liked for it to have been. And I'm basically just trying to hold on to some of my hybrid charge at the moment. You can see I've got a little bit left there in the KERS meter, or the hybrid meter, down at the bottom of the speedo in the bottom right, and I'm basically just trying to save it for round about now. I'm using it to accelerate up to about 280 kilometers per hour and then stopping and basically just keeping the remainder of the charge, although I did use up the very last little bit there as we're coming across the start finish line. But coming into turn 1 at the end of the very first racing lap, we're up into P3, so we're looking pretty good, but I want to try and hold on to an Audi if possible, whether it's the 2 guys in front of me or if Lucas, who is behind, manages to close up. Try and hold on to them and try and extend my fuel stints, as basically I want to try and do this race in as shorter or as fewer pit stops as possible, because as I mentioned earlier, Toyota has the fuel advantage over the Audi. It can hold more fuel in its fuel tank. I believe the Audi holds about 50 litres in total and the Toyota holds up to about 62.5, 63 litres. We do use more fuel per lap than the Audi does, but it's not enough for the Audi to negate that disadvantage there with the fuel strategy. So much better run through Ascari that time, coming off the corner, and now we've basically got to a point where I'm running out of hybrid charge coming off the turns. That's why I wanted to save some of the hybrid charge on the actual start-finish line at the beginning of the first racing lap, as I knew that was basically at some point I was going to run out of hybrid charge when accelerating off of each straight, and I basically just wanted to delay getting to that point and carry it as far into the race as I possibly can. So here you can see the Audi of Lucas behind us closing up as we're coming in towards turn 1. The Audis do have a straight line speed advantage over the Toyota, and also the Porsche 919 has a couple of those, couple of drivers, shall I say, in the LMP1 class that is driving those. So yeah, Audi is very much the car to be in on this circuit, but the championship was kind of designed to favour or kind of switch between the various different cars, and also the race lengths as well. got various varying different race lengths across the season. 4 of the races are 2 hours long, and another 4 are 2.4 hours in length, so 2 hours and 20 minutes, which kind of really brings it right up onto the cusp of the Toyotas doing almost 3 stints, or being able to stretch your fuel stints to being able to do just 3 pit stops rather than 4. So here you can see we're already coming up to one of the back markers, and it's actually a GTE car. You probably saw or noticed them in the at the beginning of the qualifying lap. We do actually have 3 classes in this championship. We've got the LMP1 cars, the LMP2 cars, and also a whole bunch of GTEs, and that was the first guy that we're just lapping there very nicely out the way, so not impeding us there. But this time Lucas is getting a much better run with that straight line speed advantage, but also the slipstream coming down the start finish straight as well. He managed to close out quite tremendously onto the rear of my car, but he didn't really look to the inside. Didn't really look for the move coming into the first turn, and just kind of held station in behind me, so didn't really need to go full on defensive. But now we're starting to come up to the thicker part of the GTE traffic. So the first car that we've got here is an M6 GTE using a short spurt of the hybrid. We'll clear him before we get to the first of the 2 Lesmos, and actually managed to position him rather very nicely between myself and Lucas, but Lucas manages to dispatch him relatively quickly, timing it pretty well with that Ford GT there to not really get held up too much coming off the exit. May have just held me back just a tiny bit, a couple of tenths of a second, but nothing too major, which is good. And now I'm just basically just trying to give myself a little bit of space to come through the Ascari chicane with this Ford GT in front of us, so I could get accelerate hard off the corner. And that was just a little bit of a scary moment there, where the Ford GT kind of just moved over a little bit in front of me, and kind of made it a little bit more difficult to actually, well, for me to guess which way he was going to end up going, and therefore ended up juking to the right. Now again squeezed slightly by a couple of GTE cars, and I got Lucas, who's got a much better run coming off the corner, probably using a little bit more hybrid than I did with the slipstream as well. And he's managed to go and snatch that position before we even get to the braking zone for the first turn. But he's gone a little bit deep there, which could allow me to cut back underneath a little bit, but he's gone and lost the rear end of the car slightly. Slight tap there on the front right. Fortunately, that hasn't done any damage to my car, so we'll continue on our way, and I'll just slot in behind him. Because now what I want to do is hold on to Lucas in front of me, just stay kind of basically this distance, stay in his slipstream, basically just try and fuel save as much as possible. But obviously with the lap traffic, things are going to be a little bit more difficult, and you can see that as I'm coming up behind some of these GTE cars, what I'm doing is actually dragging the brake a little bit whilst still accelerating, so I'm not losing too much speed, but I'm gaining some of the hybrid charge back, ready to use coming off the corner when accelerating out of the turn, and coming past the GTE cars. Lucas goes a little bit deep there and runs up over the curb. Coming through Ascari, just going to give us a relatively decent run. Used a little bit of the hybrid, but he hasn't really used too much coming off it, and as I was saying, I want to kind of keep myself situated behind, so I'm not going to use all the hybrid to blast past, but he does brake a little bit earlier there coming into the final turn, so I'll take the position momentarily. And now, because I've got a good chunk of hybrid energy available to me, I'm going to use all of that coming down this start finish straight, and basically now just kind of hold the position in third place. There's 2 things I'm trying to do here with Lucas. There's one, try and keep with him if he does manage to get past me, but also to actually hold him up as well, so that if he does get some clear air, he doesn't pull away. So kind of going a little bit more defensive, kind of letting him go through where he goes and takes the position, and not really fighting it too much to lose too much time to the guys in front, but also when I do get the opportunities to be ahead and try and keep him back for some potential fuel saving later on in the stint, doing that as well. So there's 2 kind of slightly contradictory strategies there going on, but it's overall it should help me out in extending this first stint longer into the race, and be beneficial for me there, and also my teammate as well, Warren Ty. He's managed to recover and get himself back up into 5th as we can see down on the relative down in the bottom left, and he's only 2.5 seconds behind me, a second and a half off the back of Lucas. So kind of also want to bring him into play as well, see if we can get some kind of inter-team strategies going on, working alongside each other to keep Lucas at bay. And as you can see, not the best run coming off of the parabolica there. Lucas with that slipstream, so he's going to slide on past me before we get to the first braking zone. So I'm just going to hold the position around the outside here and just kind of slot in behind him. We'll now do a little bit of fuel saving, a little bit of oversteer there coming off the corner, but not too much. So we're just trying to put the power down, and as you can see, that is the difference there between our hybrid strategies and also the deployment of the hybrid for the Toyota as well. It's much more punchy than the other two cars. That allowed me to close up. I think I probably saved a little bit more as well, which then allowed me to close up, but because Lucas was just kind of placing his car in the middle of the road, I wasn't really too sure which side to go for, and in the end I kind of had to back out of actually trying to pass him before the second chicane. And now we're coming up to one of the LMP2 cars. One of the back markers there. These are a little bit more difficult to pass than the GTEs, because obviously the LMP1's got so much more acceleration, so much more downforce and top end speed over the GTE cars. Even though in some of the slow corners the apex speeds, it's going to be very, very similar between the GTE and the LMP1 cars, and the LMP2s for that matter. But the LMP2 cars, they got some reasonable amounts of straight line speed. They got some reasonable amounts of downforce as well, so they are a little bit more difficult to pass. You do have to get the timing just right in order to be able to do so. But obviously we've got the acceleration, which heavily favours us in the LMP1 cars in comparison to the other two classes, and they are also instructed to hold their line, to try and stick to the racing line as much as possible, because it therefore makes it so much easier for the faster class to predict where that driver is going to be and when, and then basically plan their pass in and around that. So you see a number of drivers taking their usual racing lines going into the corners, and we just kind of have to grin and bear it, sit behind and basically plan to try and get them off the corner. Don't really want to go for any wild lunges as well. Basically all we're trying to do is minimise the risk as much as possible and allow the pass of the lap traffic to be done as quickly and as safely as possible, because the more time that you spend trying to get alongside and trying to get past another driver, the more time you are going to end up losing. So yeah, you don't really want to be side by side through an LMP2 car through a turn. And then obviously when it comes to actually lapping your own class, the usual blue flag rules apply, so they are obliged to move off the racing line and let you through, just because the difference in car performance isn't really there. So you can see about 15 minutes into this race. Obviously there was a few minutes that we lost to the formation lap. I'm losing the back of Lucas a little bit, and one tyre, my teammate, is closing up behind me as well. So just trying to think of what we can do here, what kind of pace that one tyre has, whether it's worth letting him through to try and hunt down Lucas in front and trying to basically use one tyre to close up to the back of Lucas once again. But as you can see with the lap traffic, Lucas getting caught up behind an LMP2 car. It's allowed us to close up a few car lengths, gain a few tenths on him. It's just the way the traffic works in multi-class racing. Sometimes it works very much in your favour, sometimes it works very much against you. It's just something that you have to deal with. But with me going out very wide there, left out to avoid getting a potential slowdown penalty, and that allows one tyre to go through. So he gives the LMP2 car a quick flash of the lights, and the LMP2 very kindly gets off the throttle very early and slightly onto the brakes, which will allow me to pass as well before we get into the Ascari chicane, which is very useful. So now we're back down into 5th position, back where we started. But it's a very, very long race. Anything can happen in these long endurance races. You can have a moment with some multi-class traffic, long or delayed pit stop, or you could just end up making some driver error or some kind of mistake which cost you a position or two. So yeah, it's important to not get too disheartened as I get very, very close there with the LMP2 car. I was expecting them to hold a line slightly further to the right, but did come across slightly left as I was basically end up committing myself to going left. As you can see, lost a little bit of time as well. And also what you may have noticed about 20-30 seconds ago is I made a brake bias adjustment, shifting the brake bias from 57 on the front to 59 on the front. That's mainly because I'm looking up in the top right, looking at the tyre pressures. I'm seeing just a very slight disparity between the front and rear tyre pressures. Basically, I want them to be the same on all four tyres, both front and rear, as Warren Tyre, my teammate. Goes a little bit deep into the Ascari chicane, loses a whole bunch of time as we were coming up with, well, both some GTE and LMP2 traffic as well. So things are getting a little bit interesting here. I'll take the GTE before we go into the parabolic. I give him plenty of room, but that LMP2 car that was in front of us ended up running deep on the brakes, so we don't have to worry about him. Now we're going to slide past the LMP2 and also the GTE car, having to kind of take to the apron slightly on the right hand side of the track. And we'll get that GTE as well before the braking zone. So things are starting to get a little bit interesting as I get a little bit deep on the brakes there. Coming for the first turn, just carrying a little bit more speed than I was initially expecting. And as I mentioned earlier, I was kind of hoping that Warren Tyre, if I did let him through, will be able to close up onto the back of Lucas. That's pretty much exactly what he's done. He's near enough in around he's less than a second between the two of them. So hopefully, if they start battling, that will allow me to close up the second to second and a half gap that I have on the two guys in front, and bring me back into play as well. So I haven't really lost too much ground to them, but everything car-wise is looking pretty good at the moment. The car's slightly oversteery in some parts, especially in the dirty air, but it's kind of a natural thing as teammate Warren Tyre goes and spins off to the left-hand side of the circuit. So back up into fourth, and we've now got a 2-second gap to Lucas in front. It's very unfortunate for my teammate. Obviously not ideal. I was hoping that I was going to be able to stick with Lucas for quite a bit longer. So we're once again up to some GTE cars and a bit more traffic. We're now actually coming up to the LMP2 leader, who has a pretty healthy lead over his LMP2 competitors. Also got some of the front runners in the GTE class that we're closing up in on as well. Just about managing to get the car slowed down and make it into the apex for the first corner. And we blast past one of the Aston Martins for turn 3. And I'm just looking at this 2-second gap that I've got to Lucas up in front. Basically just trying to figure out where and how I can close that time up. And it's moments like this that I really need to make use of, where he gets caught up behind some lap traffic, which will allow me to close up the gap. Should get past Andrex before the second Lesmo. I'm going to have to stay in behind for the moment. It's very important in these LMP1 cars to leave yourself some space between you and the lap car in front that you're about to pass. So obviously if you go and tuck yourself right up underneath the rear wing of a GTE car in front of you, you can only accelerate off the corner as quickly as that GTE car. Don't have the space to get yourself the momentum and the run off the corner, whereas you do give yourself a couple of car lengths. Obviously you're going to basically accelerate at your usual acceleration point, use the full width of the track, and then be able to pull in, or pull out shall I say, to slide on past, especially when deploying the hybrid energy as well. The closing speeds become pretty insane, and you really have to be on the money and on the ball in order to judge it correctly. So there's a little bit of lag there for Lucas. He's kind of veering over to the middle of the track and then jumps back over to the left. Not the tidiest of runs coming off the first turn. Using a load of the hybrid, but saving it because I know that I'm right up underneath the rear wing of Lucas now, and I'm going to be able to use the slipstream coming down towards the second chicane which is going to help me out. But Lucas is looking to the inside of this Ford GT, who does give him the racing room. I've kind of managed to capitalise on that as well, and actually gone and stolen the position up into third place. Lucas wasn't really too sure if he was going to get the room or not. I saw the Ford GT was going wide, and with Lucas being extra slow and extra cautious, I was able to sneak on through and take that third position, but he's now right behind me. But I do also have the added advantage of some extra hybrid energy, which I wouldn't usually have if I was deploying it in my usual fashion, or had deployed it in my usual fashion coming off of turn 2 and out the exit of the first chicane. So we've got a bit more to play with and a bit more to defend with, using a little bit more there than I probably would have liked to have done, just to try and keep Lucas a little bit further back as we come into the final corner, using the advantage of having the clear air in front of me to really work the downforce coming through the final turn. And now we're going to deploy all of the hybrid energy that is available to me to try and defend coming into the first turn, seeing Lucas closing up in the rear view mirror up above, but isn't going to be close enough to make a move coming into the first corner. So just going to hold the station.
There's a white and red LMP2 car lagging a lot.
Just got a couple of the guys talking there across Discord. I do apologise for that, and also the quieter audio at the beginning of the race as well. Basically had it turned down because our lead coordinator Andrex was basically giving a bit of
terrifying, holy fuck.
a bit of a briefing to all the drivers, how to do things and stuff, just making sure that they know the state of play for the race, especially when it comes to the multi-class traffic and the whole kind of endurance factor of it being a long race. There's no need to take massive risks, and obviously with myself talking, didn't really want too much of a crossover between the two chats, and therefore turn the volume down. But now things a little bit louder, and I do know that in the future rounds coming, I do also get my audio sorted out, so I've got Discord and the game sound on 2 separate audio tracks, and therefore don't have to worry about that in future rounds. So it's only this round and potentially the second race, I think, where I have it set up like this, so I apologise for that. But from round 3 onwards, I think it is, things are all pretty good. I think it's either round 3 or 4, can't quite remember off the top of my head. But anyway, coming back to the racing action, still holding on to P3 at the moment, but we are a good 30 seconds or so, just slightly less off the race leader, so don't quite have the pace of Endless out at the front. Berserker's doing a pretty good job of holding on to Endless, keeping himself lurking in and around 6 seconds according to the delta up in the top left, and obviously I'm a bit further behind, and I've got Lucas there lurking not too far behind me. Worn tyre is about 6 seconds off the back of me after recovering from his half spin. I think he managed to keep it out of the wall and not suffer any damage from that spin, but obviously he lost a whole bunch of time. And yeah, basically got all the various HUD elements up there, so you guys get, or well, mainly for myself when I was actually driving, to try and get the best picture of what was going on in the race, how the car is doing, how my lap times are doing, kind of the consistency and pace that I'm setting, and yeah, get an idea as to what the guys who are competing with, what they're doing in terms of their race position and everything. But obviously that's quite useful information for you guys as well.
Thank you, Speed.
Obviously got all the positions up there in the top left, and that will show the distance between myself and the race leader, and essentially the top 6 and a couple of guys in front of me. And down below we've got our lap board information, where we can see our current lap, our potential lap time, which is
These LMP cars, watch out in overtaking on the first chicane.
Yeah, which is composed of the best sectors, or best times from each sector, and therefore created a theoretical ultimate best lap, which is the potential lap there, and then obviously you can see the lap times for the last handful of laps. And then down below that we've got the relative board, which basically shows which cars are directly in front and behind with live updating times. There is a little bit of added movement with the times as well. They're not always quite 100% accurate. They do kind of extend and shrink a little bit, kind of braking and accelerating when you go through corners. And obviously the speedo is down there over on the bottom right. I've also got the fuel and also the oil temperature over there, which is pretty important because we do have mechanical failures in this race, so I need to make sure that my oil temperature isn't creeping up too high that I start suffering major amounts of engine damage, as Lucas is getting very, very close to the back of me coming up into the first chicane here. I was kind of alongside the Ford in the braking zone. I think Lucas was quite eager to basically get ahead of the Ford coming into the first chicane as well, as to not lose too much time to me. But in doing so he has also gone a little bit deep in that first chicane and lost some time, and he's now just lunged down the inside of an LMP2 car coming into the second chicane, which is allowing me to hold and build a little bit of a gap. So we've passed another Ford GTLM car. And then yeah, up in the top right we've got all the car information, basically suspension, what kind of health state that is in. So if I take any damage, that'll be indicated there. We can see the brake temperatures live and updating, and we can see that things are all good there. Actually don't want them to be dropping any lower than about 300 degrees centigrade coming down the straights. I don't really want them to be creeping up any higher than 1250, 1300 degrees centigrade, even if the colours do suggest that they are getting a little bit hot. But yeah, to the right of that, obviously we've got the tyre pressures and also the state of the tyres, with both the temperature and the amount of wear. I'm using the soft tyre on the LMP1 car pretty much throughout the entirety of the season, which is quite interesting. The LMP1 cars, these hybrid ones anyway, certainly prefer the soft tyre over the hard. Get a lot more grip from it, and despite what seems to be relatively quick wear to begin with, in the first few laps of a stint, things do kind of tend to settle down and slow down a bit as the stint goes on. And the soft tyres do hold up pretty reasonably well across the duration of the races as well. So won't be needing to change tyres every single stop, but one or two we may need to do so. And now we come up to a slightly tricky situation where we've got a Corvette here in front of us. As you can see, just jumping on the brake and dragging that a lot earlier than I would like to, coming in towards the Ascari chicane. Just give me some more hybrid charge to use coming off the corner, but as you saw, would have lost some ground to Lucas behind and basically lost some lap time, but it's much better to be safe rather than sorry. Just kind of have to take it on the chin, be patient, and not worry about it too much. And obviously that final indicator up in the top right is the damage. We've also got the engine damage up there, so any aero damage that I get on the front or the rear of the car will be indicated up there, and it'll basically help me determine whether I need to make a pit stop or not to get any aero damage or any other kind of damage for that matter repaired. So plenty of information to look at and absorb during the race, plus obviously all the stuff that is on the little display on the steering wheel. But most of that is covered up on the HUD as well. It's just useful to have the extra stuff needed. Oh, now we've got two GTE cars here in front of me, and I'm being ultra patient, just sitting in behind them, which is going to allow Lucas to close right up onto the back of me. I'd rather do that than scare them into a potential mistake, saving some more of the hybrid for later on in the lap. So we're coming up towards the back of an LMP2 car, so again braking a little bit earlier than I would usually like to. Car braking away from me slightly as we're coming into the Ascari chicane. So I've sat in the dirty air of that LMP2 car in front, and now, just as you saw, moved over to the right hand side there to basically put Lucas out of my slipstream as he was passing the LMP2 car, and instead give the LMP2 car a little bit of slipstream as well. A little bit of a cheeky tactic, something that's very, very good and very useful to do in these kind of multi-class situations. Just helps you defend and makes it a little bit more difficult for the guy who is chasing you down in the same class as you to actually get past that slower class car. It's very, very small minor things, but sometimes it can work in your favour if you get it timed right, and they do really benefit from the slipstream. Entirely depends on the performance of the car. Obviously doing it to an LMP2 car is pretty good because they have quite a bit of aerodynamics and a bit of aerodynamical drag. If you can minimise that, even on a track such as Monza, it'll give them a slightly better straight line speed boost. As you saw, made a slight mistake going into the second chicane. Just kind of outbraked myself a little bit, but we managed to hold on to it. But Lucas is very much within half a second behind, lurking there reasonably close. Basically just trying to look after and preserve the tyres a little bit, mainly because I'm looking at that front left and seeing the amount of wear that I've had on it already. Lucas is looking to be pretty happy to just sit in behind me for the moment, so he's obviously doing some fuel saving, which is good for me. Oh wow, it's not actually really all that good for me, but now Lucas has got a whole bunch of hybrid charge and he's going to absolutely blast past on the run down towards turn 1, moving across to try and pick up the slipstream as early as possible. He's going to get the position before the first corner, just going to settle in behind, following through. So now it's my turn to try and do a little bit of fuel saving. I know that I'm very much out of touch of the race leaders, don't have the pace that they have, so I'd rather just try and fuel save if I can. And as you can see, holding on to the back of Lucas there. These LMP1 cars really do not like those big orange sausage curbs that are there on the inside of the second chicane. And quite interestingly, Lucas doesn't use any hybrid between that second chicane and the first of the two Lesmos, whereas I do use a tiny bit to get my speed up. I think he prefers to save that hybrid energy for this run here, coming down this straight, or alternatively one of the other straights later on in the lap. Whereas obviously I use a little bit to try and bring the car back up to speed and accelerate off the corner a little bit harder. But you can just see the effect of the dirty air coming through the Ascari chicane there. Gone and lost touch with Lucas a little bit. Still not had the downforce I've previously been benefiting from, running in front, back up in third position. But in places like this, on the long straights, having a bit more hybrid energy and having the slipstream obviously benefits you. Use less fuel and allows you to carry or get up to higher top speed a little bit quicker. So now I've just got to try and hold on to the back of Lucas if I can. 20 litres of fuel remaining, so in the next 5 to 10 laps I'll be coming in for our first pit stop. Let's go and catch the orange sausage curve quite awkwardly there. Did catch it with the inside tyres, but as you saw, just lifted the inside of the car up, which really is not good for the aerodynamics and getting the grip through the corner that you need to get through it effectively. So now just trying to preserve a little bit of the hybrid, as you saw, just leaving a little bit left as I was accelerating up to 270 kilometers an hour. And now that LMP2 car's gone deep, so it's given me a nice clean run through the exit of Ascari. Again, using some hybrid out the exit of the turn, but not using it all. As you can see, just delaying the deployment slightly coming off the final turn, just so I can get up to a slightly higher speed a little bit earlier. And if I was to use the hybrid energy for coming off the corner. So Ford GT gets very nicely out of the way there before the second chicane. They are allowed to do that if they so wish, and are going to make it very clear. And Lucas has actually been held up by two battling GTE cars, which has allowed me to really shrink the gap that was between us two. Got it back down to around a second, so at least near enough halved it. Which is good news for me. Gives me a little bit more encouragement and gives me another chance to try and hold on to the back of his Audi, try and fuel save a little bit. And as you can see, saving a decent chunk of the hybrid energy for coming off the final turn here.
Same goes for the GTE drivers with the side of blinding.
And again, apologise for the people chatting in Discord. Again, slipstream of this LMP2 car coming towards the first corner, so we'll need to get onto the brakes a little bit earlier. I'm actually going to have to settle in behind this black Ford GT. But his apex speeds are going to be relatively similar to mine going through that first chicane there, so it's not really too much of a hindrance, and had enough of a space to get a relatively decent run coming off the corner as well. And as you can see, using again a little bit more hybrid than Lucas has coming off of the first chicane, has allowed me to close right up in, and once again he doesn't use any hybrid between that second chicane and the first Lesmo. But with him running in the clear area, he's got quite a bit more downforce than I do to get through the first two Lesmos. You can see I've dropped back a few car lengths. Just kind of holding station in the slipstream at the moment, just sticking quite nicely with him. Good run through Ascari there. Don't really want to climb up over the curbs too much in the LMP1 cars. Now picking up the slipstream of this the Ford GT before switching to Lucas's slipstream. Coming into the final turn, both of us weren't really tucked into the apex quite as much as either of us would have liked to have been. Using a little bit of hybrid there just to try and stay relatively close to Lucas coming off the corner initially, and then using a bit more. So as you can see, he's now starting to pull away despite me having the slipstream. Now coming quite nicely into the first chicane, just kind of holding station again.
To take a peek.
It's going to be very fast. Yeah, like the marine damage.
A few drivers there just discussing the perils of endurance racing, especially when you got multiple hours worth of racing and someone already needing a bathroom break. Moments like this is pretty ideal for me, where he's getting caught up behind the GTE in front, but end up catching the inside curve and taking just a little bit too much. Got me a slowdown penalty, or should I say a slowdown warning, which decided to serve in order to avoid getting a time penalty.
Don't switch to medium or lean because it destroys lap times and it doesn't save enough fuel to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, it's not really. Trying to think, it's not really worth taking the time penalties, just in case I end up being close to someone at the end of the race. As Lucas goes very deep in the first chicane there, trying to get past the Hunter in the Aston Martin. Have also noticed that Berserker has gone and served his pit stop. He's now 31 seconds behind the race leader, and not too far up the road from us, with a whole train of cars, two LMP2 cars in front. Dude decided it's better to actually just slot him behind, but now we've got a slight predicament here of how we're going to navigate around these guys, and instead I just try and play the safe option and settle in behind. So LMP2 goes past the GTE, and now I've got a nice straight where I can deploy the hybrid energy. I can blip past those two pieces of lap traffic. We're not going to be able to get past this LMP2 before this Scarish chicane, so just get on the brakes a little bit earlier, dragging the brake there whilst keeping my foot in on the accelerator and recharging some of my hybrid energy.
Okay, but it's long enough for a B, FYI.
Sorry, York, I didn't see you coming. My bad.
And now Endless is into the pit lane as well. So the race leader into the pits. It's in and around that time where the Audis need to pit, and Lucas goes and dives into the pits. And so is Berserker, actually, as well. If I remember correctly, don't think he had his strategy set out quite right, and I think he didn't take any fuel or something like that. I think he managed to pit with basically a lap's worth of fuel still remaining. But yeah, that meant he had to go into the pit lane for a second time, and has now gifted me the race lead as I've come out ahead of Endless. He's just come out behind me, really. He's just over a second behind, and my teammate is now 2.5 seconds or so behind me as well. So he's done a solid job of running some solid pace and closing up onto the back of me, potentially with the lap traffic that I've had over the last couple of laps as well. That's allowed him to close up a little bit more. Ran a little bit wide there through the second Lesmo. I was just kind of hesitating on the hybrid to make sure that I didn't catch a slowdown warning. So now I've got some clear air with 9.5 litres of fuel remaining. Be pitting in the next 4 laps or so. That's when I'll be coming from my first pit stop. And at this point I'm kind of looking at the tyre wear up in the top left, and trying to decide whether it is worth changing the tyres or whether it's better to stick with the set that I've currently got. And you can hear, or you can see me here just changing or double checking the race strategy just to make sure that I've got the right one selected. Which I do believe I have. And both Endless and Worn Tyre into the pit lane. So Worn Tyre's gone into the pits earlier than I have, and Endless has also gone into the pits as well. So now it's giving me plenty of free clear air to run out in the lead at my own pace without too much pressure. And now Lucas is the driver behind me. He's 42 seconds behind, actually ahead of Berserker as well, who's basically right with him. So the two drivers are battling away for second position at the moment. So all this is playing very, very nicely into my hands, with some drivers potentially having some issues in the pit stops. Pit crew's not quite doing what the driver wants them to do. Whether that's a bug or whether the drivers hadn't quite set up their pit strategies correctly. I know that I made sure to do mine before every single race that I did. Basically doubled and triple checked it just to make sure that everything is all set up exactly how I want it and everything is going to work correctly. So if you create fresh pit strategies for each race and delete any old ones that you are definitely not going to be using, it just eliminates any possibility of incurring any bugs. And yeah, the Insider's Guide as well also covers the pit strategy and ICM menu, so if you're not too sure how they work and how you should be setting up your pit strategies and using the ICM in the race, double check the Insider's Guide series, as I believe it is the second episode of the series that I have on my channel, where I basically explain all that and how the systems work. Now we've got our first bit of LMP1 lap traffic. Porsche 919. He's going to need to get out of my way. It's a blue flag situation, so he will need to effectively lift and let me pass. But because the Toyota's hybrid is a little bit more punchy than the Porsches, and I think he probably hesitated or didn't use quite as much hybrid coming off the final turn, I was able to slip on past down the start-finish straight without really losing too much time. And we've got a little bit of traffic here. There we go. Blast past the LMP2 and also the GTE cars. Both of them, in fact. And now Berserker has managed to get ahead of Lucas as well. The gap 44.5 to 45 seconds. So gained a little bit of time to P2 and P3, but not an absolutely massive amount. Obviously coming into traffic in a couple of places, and I think with the those two drivers scrapping over P2 probably hindered them a little bit more. Now I've got 4.2 litres of fuel in the car, so I can probably go for one more complete lap after this one. I'll definitely be safe with that. Going for another after that one will be pretty risky. So now just having a look at the strategy, as you can see. Bringing up the ICM, shall I say, just double checking things, making sure that they're all good there. Here's just a quick double check of my traction control settings, or TC slip settings. So now we're going to race strategy, just double checking that everything is all set as to how I'd like it to be. So I'll be taking the a set of soft slicks on the next stop. I'll be filling up the car up to the brim, 62 litres. And you saw I just turned off all the damage repairs, as I haven't incurred any damage in this stint. So just double checking that it is set to off. And the reason why the refuel car and the amount of fuel is in red is because that is signifying that I will not be able to make it to the end of the race with that fuel load. And obviously with an hour and 10 minutes still to go in this race, I will be needing to make a second pit stop before the end of the race as well, just to see me to the end. That was always going to be the plan. And once you've got enough fuel to go to the end, or are going to be taking on enough fuel, that number will actually turn to white as well, as you'll see later on in the race. The more laps that you do, the more laps that you turn at race pace, the more accurate the fuel estimation is going to become, as it is kind of using an average. So here we go then, coming into the pit lane, getting the car slowed down before the pit speed limiter line, just making sure that it gets set down or slowed down properly. And the actual lobby settings weren't quite set up 100% correctly. We were meant to be using manual control in the pit lane, but this one was accidentally left with automatic control, so the AI was taking over coming into the pits, so everyone was at the discretion of that. And as you can see, just waiting for all the fuel to go in. The pit stops were made to basically replicate the race series and how they do their pit stops. So at the time, the World Endurance Championship was refueling first, and then once the refueling was done, then it was allowed to go up on the jacks and the tyres were allowed to be changed. So that is why the pit stops have been done in that way. And just double checking that the soft slit tyres have gone on in the pit stop. So coming out of the pit lane now and off the limiter. I rejoin the track in third position. And once that delta sorts itself up in the top left, I believe we should be in and around 21 seconds behind the race leader, and that difference would have come from me taking tyres, fresh set of tyres in the stop, because tyre change tends to take about 14 to 16 seconds, as they do basically replicate the length of the pit stop times that the real world series would take to get the tyres changed. And with Formula 1 and things like that, with the Formula A car and the Formula X, they use the F1 pit stops, so all 4 tyres are done at the same time, whereas in GT3 and these pit stops here with the prototype cars and the other GT cars, I believe the tyres are done with the front tyres first and then the rear tyres afterwards, but it's only one person who's using the wheel gun, taking off the tyre and putting a new tyre on. There is another guy who does help, but I think he only really. Actually, I think the other guy actually puts the tyre, takes the tyre off and puts the other tyre on and holds it in position for the wheel gunner to put it in. But it's nowhere near as quick as an F1 pit stop, as the mechanics do have to move around the car and do all the tyres there. So just looking up in the top left, my teammate has now got a 32-second penalty. Not entirely sure what that may be for, because obviously that's going to be a very excessive cut track penalty. So I'm kind of being for that. He's already been through the pits. So I think it may have potentially been for not serving a hand back position penalty. So either, well, you basically pass someone off the track effectively, but as we do have post-race stewards here at AOR, if he had to take evasive action and go off the track to pass someone legitimately, he can take that to the stewards and get that penalty removed. And as it's 32 seconds and not just 30, which is what the penalty would have been if it was just a hand back position penalty, I think he's picked up a bit of a time penalty with it as well. And you can see now actually adjusting the fuel load and trying to find out whereabouts that optimal amount of fuel is that I'm going to be needing for the remainder of the race. And as you can see, under 30 litres isn't going to be enough to make it to the end of the race after my next stop, whereas over 30 litres is, and I'm just taking on planning on taking on 32 litres there, just to be safe. Make sure I've got a couple of litres spare, just in case I need it when it comes to the end of the race. Make sure that I do actually get to the finish without running out of fuel. So now that we're back out in third position, obviously all the positions have been jumbled up slightly. Berserker's out in the lead at the moment despite making 2 pit stops. Lucas is now in second. He's about 8 seconds behind Berserker, but Lucas I don't think has taken a fresh set of tyres in that pit stop, whereas obviously I did. Now 25 seconds off the race lead, and I've got my teammate worn tyre. He's about 9 seconds behind me, and right behind him is Endless. So Endless is the one who's really lost out, as he was out leading the race by a relatively decent margin before the pit stop phases, or should I say the first pit stop phase. But with that, it does give us some potential for a relatively decent result. Just need to make sure that I'm turning in some good laps. I'm trying to maintain or potentially close down that gap to Lucas in front. So when he does go and make his second pit stop and take on a fresh set of tyres, which if he's using the same strategy as me, doing basically running with a soft tyre, then he'll probably need to do so before the end of the race, as the car does get very, very skittish when there's barely any rubber. I've basically done one. My strategy for this race was doing the first stint on a set of tyres, and then the second stint on a new, fresher set of tyres, and the last little bit with the little splash and dash basically keeping with the tyres that I'm running in the second stint here. So as they're basically to just try and give myself as fresh a tyres as possible for the most amount of time throughout the duration of the race, because if I went and did a double stint for stint 1 and 2 on the same set of tyres, then by the end of stint 2 the tyres will be a lot more worn. But obviously for that final shorter stint you will have a fresh set of boots, so it's kind of some perks either way.
Yeah, I exited him from the game as fast as possible.
You can see my lap times aren't exactly good when I keep making the odd little mistake running out a little bit wide. Just lifting off just to make sure that I did negate any potential advantage and that I did counteract any potential slowdown penalty that would be popping up. This is slightly better, slightly more consistent pace, still though half a second off of my previous best, but that's probably in and around when I was using alternate hybrid strategies rather than my usual lap by lap hybrid strategy. Possibly also some additional slipstream from some of the other drivers as well. I'm going to go half a second off, so a high 29 on the previous lap, the gap 26.5 to 27 seconds to Berserker in front, so I need to keep an eye on that. So getting caught slightly behind the Porsche there. Was initially thinking of going inside, but then I kind of suddenly thought that the Porsche may take its usual racing line and close that gap, so then went out to the outside, but I kind of decided to do that a little bit later. It was a little bit closer to the Porsche than I would have actually liked to have been. Now getting caught up behind the Aston Martin in front. And there you can see why you should not get caught up underneath the rear wing of a much slower class car coming off the exit of the turn, because you do need to hesitate coming off the corner and accelerating out of it. That will then just hurt you down the rest of the straight as well. Something else that a few of you may potentially have realised is Endless is closing up behind me, or at least he was. Gap in and around 3 seconds at the moment, such as his pace on a lap per lap basis. And the gap now up to 30 seconds to Berserker out in the race lead, all because of that traffic on the previous lap, and as you can see, a good 2 seconds slower than my previous fastest lap in this race. Certainly not ideal. But that's just the ebbs and flows of multi-class traffic, as I always say, and as you can see up in the top left, the gap is now back down to 26.5 seconds, so gained a whole bunch of time on the race leader, probably with them getting caught up behind some lap traffic. As you can see, within a tenth of my previous best in sector 1, so picking up the pace a little bit here, which is good. Just kind of need to keep this consistency going, and hopefully it will be enough to close onto the race leaders and put me in a prime position for when they make their second pit stop to try and pounce us. It's the main thing that I've got or shall I say the main card that I have in my hand to play in these endurance races, is playing the fuel strategy with the Toyota versus the Audi. and effectively trying to win the races like that, because on some of the circuits, some of the heavier power circuits, where the Audi can really stretch its legs, such as here at Monza, not really going to have that straight line speed that the Audi has, so it's naturally going to hang in their favour in terms of getting, say, a race win. So I've got to be a little bit smarter and be a little bit cleverer with the race strategy, try and play that card as and where I can, and then obviously the other circuits which aren't power circuits, try and use the Toyota to its full potential there as well. So getting caught up behind an LMP2 car slightly. I'm not going to be able to clear it before the first Lesmo, which is really detrimental to my pursuit of P1. It's also allowing Berserker to close up pretty rapidly. I probably could have gone for a potential short spurt of curves, or hybrid, sorry, between the two Lesmos there, but I didn't really fancy risking it. Instead, just kind of biting the bullet and holding station behind. Still within 30 seconds to the race leader. This car's a little bit skittish, and then Endless goes and makes a mistake there behind me, which has dropped him back off behind by a couple of seconds. So it's giving me some breathing room, a bit of time to relax slightly, which is good. And we're now coming up to the back of one of the LMP1 class drivers. It's one of the Porsches. I believe there's two Porsches, two Toyotas, and then all the rest are Audis. And the Audis do get a choice of running either the Fuji or the Le Mans kit for each race as well. It's down to their discretion as to which one they wanted to use, and obviously the lower downforce Le Mans kit would be the one that I'll be using here for this circuit, because they don't need the downforce that the Fuji version comes with. And Porsche getting caught up behind some lap traffic, and now put Endless right up onto the back of my car, using some hybrid there to hop past a couple of the GTEs, and Endless also manages to follow me through. They're still there right on my tail. I'm kind of hindered slightly by this Porsche in front of me, and them making their way through the traffic. They now very kindly get out of the way, as they should be doing in the blue flag situation there. It's the same class, but this has put Endless right up onto the back of me, and as you can see, closing up a little bit more, coming into the Ascari chicane here. It's really not going to do me any favours in trying to hold on to the position and trying to keep him that bay behind. So just saving a little bit of hybrid for coming off the final turn here to try and defend coming into the first corner, but I think it's going to be near next to useless, as I'm now going to deploy the hybrid energy. So this was getting a little bit of a run initially, but now he's getting the slipstream. And there is the speed advantage, going very defensive to Endless though, forcing him right over to the far right hand side of the circuit, and that's going to force him to go deep as I go and take the chicane. So I'm going to be able to hold on to the position here and defend from that third place just by squeezing Endless over to the right hand side and making it very tight angle coming into that first corner. I think he may have missed his braking point a little bit, and with the speed that he picked up from the slipstream as well, just misjudging the braking zone. So we're still in third, but we're now 32.5 seconds off the back of the race leader, mainly due to the lap traffic on the previous lap. Just getting caught up there. Obviously not ideal, but we're now into the final hour of the race as well. One tire, did you get my message? Less than 55 minutes remaining, and I was just talking to One Tire there on the Discord, just asking if he got a message that I sent him, which I think may have been in the pit stops previously.
I don't know how to turn it off.
And there was this response, having read it. I'm pretty sure that the message that I was saying was to reduce your fuel load for the second stop. Should be able to in the ICM menu. Adjust strategy. It was either reducing the fuel load, as Endless is actually going for the dive down the inside. I wasn't really expecting that, but saw it coming out the last minute, saw it obviously glance over. That's now him back up into third position. Wasn't really too much that I could do there. I wasn't really predicting the move, so basically just held station, didn't go to defend it, and he just took the available space and managed to get the car slowed down. So props to him for that move. This is a very good clean one. So now just trying to race a little bit hard and try and keep up with Endless, because he's got some serious pace. He will inevitably start closing in on the two guys in front. So if I can keep up with him, that will help me claw up onto towards the back of them slightly, as well as he's getting squeezed over to the left hand side of the track there as the BMW was trying to get out of our way. He just kind of misread the situation, so that was a slightly hairy moment watching that, but no harm, no foul. But yeah, I think me chatting to Warn Tyre was basically telling him to either reduce the fuel load, which I think he would have already done anyway, or alternatively making sure that he's obviously got his tyres strategy switched off, so it won't change the tyres. So we did discuss our pit strategies before the race, basically told each other our plans. But yeah, you can see the pace that Endless has, clearing me by a good 2 seconds already, just over the course of a single lap. Very, very fast driver, a real force to be reckoned with. Good move last lap, Endless. And that was me just kind of congratulating him on the move, because as I said, it kind of caught me unawares a little bit. He came from quite far back, and he still made the corner, and it was pretty fair and pretty clean, to be honest. So now I've just got to try and settle in. I've got 40 litres of fuel remaining in the car at the moment. Just over 50 minutes left in this race. So still plenty of the race to go. Not going to be able to clear this forward, so settling in behind it, keeping myself a couple of car lengths just for the exit of the corner here. Just getting that switchback coming off the turn, allow me to start accelerating a little bit earlier. Try to minimise the amount of time that's lost. Now getting a run on the two Porsches. Taken to the open there to skip past the LMP2 car. Just kind of misread that situation a little bit. The speed difference was a little bit quicker than I was expecting, and I've gone a little bit deep here coming into the first chicane. Just about managing to keep the car on the track as my teammate is now into the pit lane. So Warn Tyre's making his second stop with 50 minutes remaining. So he's going to be very, very tight on fuel. He's trying to make it to the end with that one, because typically on a track like this, the Toyota will be able to last about 50 minutes to 55 minutes, depending on the amount of fuel used per lap, how much you're really pushing, how much you're able to fuel save by doing any potential lifting and coasting, or getting the slipstream of other drivers. But that's obviously dropped Warn Tyre quite far back, so that's going to allow me to focus on the guys in front. Gap 38.5 seconds between myself and the race leader, 39 seconds, sorry. So I've got quite a bit of work to do after losing a whole bunch of time with traffic and whatnot. It's not the tidiest of runs coming through Ascari, catching the inside curb. Ideally, in these LMP1 cars, you don't really want to be hammering the curbs too much like you would in a GT car, because it really does upset the aero attachment and the aero balance. You can really throw that off and cost you some of the aerodynamic grip that you have through a corner. So you want to be try and be as smooth as possible and try and keep that airflow nicely attached, whereas if you obviously go and jump over a curb, your car's going to bounce around all over the place. The air flowing over the car isn't really going to be anywhere near as stable as it should be. It's not going to stay attached all the way along the length of the car, especially on the underside, through the floor and then out through the diffuser. which is one of the main areas that these LMP1 cars do make their downforce. So getting the right ride height is key. Certainly does help with straight line speed. And maximising the aerodynamic efficiency of the car. Second off from my previous fastest. I should say the fastest lap of the race that I've done. At the end of that lap, which was lap 46. Still soldiering on. Done pretty well so far. We've only had really one kind of semi-decent sized mistake,
That was fucking scary.
which was almost a slight half spin that I had coming through the first corner. Everything else so far has been pretty good.
To have two sets of lights suddenly start facing you.
So,
Scary.
so if I can keep up that kind of consistency, I'll be pretty happy. There's me dragging the brake a little bit behind Hunter coming in towards Scary Chicane. Just not wanting to take any risks, although he does go and make a slight, well, either a slight mistake there, or he was kind of facilitating the pass coming through the mid part of the Ascari Chicane. Sort of space opened up and there was plenty of room there, although it was a little bit of a risky move to go for it, but the LMP1 car's got quite a bit more speed and aerodynamic grip, so I was able to get past before the exit without costing myself too much time there. Now it gets back down to 37 seconds. So we've taken a couple of seconds out, which is pretty good. Previous lap wasn't the best, lost a little bit of time. As you can see over the previous lap that I did.
Was very ambitious one guy. Yeah.
Whoever is them off flashing is right.
That may have been me when there was a car joining the track right in front of me.
Oh, that was free. No, but I saw you have it.
So this lap is looking a little bit better. As a few of the drivers are talking about flashing lights and a few ongoings on the track somewhere elsewhere on the circuit. Again, just catching the inside curve a little bit. Certainly not ideal.
Sorry, I found race, that was a bit ambitious. It's my fault.
Yeah, no problem, I have to go to this. Because of fuel, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I thought of it a bit last minute. I was like, oh, I should have gone for this.
Yeah, alright.
And again, I just apologise for the people talking in Discord, unfortunately, where I didn't have the Discord and game audio on two separate audio tracks to record. Can't separate the two. But as I said earlier in the video, there's it's round 3. It's where we do have or did get the separation of the audio and the game settings once I got all my recording settings set up correctly and appropriately. And therefore there won't be any Discord talking in those videos unless it's majorly important, and I feel like it kind of adds to the video to add specific parts in. Coming underneath the BMW out through the exit there. It's better to just let the GTE cars run their line out through the exit. Just bring yourself tighter. They're going to be very much on the limits of grip, and you've got a lot more grip than they have. So it's a smarter move just to go tighter on the exit, not impede them. Doesn't really affect you too much either. So things are pretty good there. Endless has managed to get himself now 23 to 24 seconds off the back of the race leader, so he's closed in quite tremendously. Whereas obviously I've fallen back due to traffic and whatnot. Gap still lurking in around 40 seconds, so pretty much lapping on pace, on par with Berserker out in the lead. He has actually extended his gap out to Lucas as well, and there is that slowdown penalty, just for running a little bit too wide out on the exit of that second Lesman corner, which is really going to hurt me because, as you can see, I'm now going to be caught up behind this Porsche coming through the Ascari chicane. It's really not ideal, so setting myself up for the switchback to be tighter on the exit. Now coming through the final corner towards the start finish line to complete lap 50, and Endless is into the pit lane. So that's now me back up into third position. He's making his what should be the final stop of the race for him, although it is right on the cusp of what the Audi can do in terms of the length of a stint. I just saw shifting the brake bias backwards one click to 58 on the front now, back from 59. Just looking at the tyre pressures up in the top right hand corner. It's 0.01 bar difference between the front and the rears. And the front ones are the ones that are slightly higher than the rears, so shifting the brake bias rearwards just by that one click make the rear brakes do a little bit more work, which means that they'll hold, or shall I say produce a little bit more heat, and they'll therefore hold a little bit more heat, and that will therefore radiate into the tyres and also affect the tyre pressures there. So a little bit of a tip: if you see a big disparity between your tyre pressures, or a reasonable disparity between your tyre pressures, you may be able to control that in the race via the brake bias, making either the front brake or the rear brakes do a little bit more of the work, produce a little bit more of the heat, which will then affect the tyre pressures. The more heat, the more the pressures will increase. The less heat, the more they'll cool. Therefore, shifting that bias rearwards should slightly balance out the tyre pressures just a little bit, so it's pretty much equal across all four corners. And there you can see that is already having a little bit of effect, as we're near enough equal, or at least on the left hand side. Front to rear is now just the right hand side, which are slightly different, as you can see, but they are kind of closing up and balancing a little bit more, so things are looking pretty good there. But yeah, it's just a neat little tip to kind of help balance and manage the tyre pressures. If you've got, say, 0.02 bar difference front to rear, just try fiddling with the brake pressure. Obviously you don't want to fiddle with it too much, that it really upsets the braking balance of the car, but adjusting it within a certain margin, a certain window, certainly works. Probably wouldn't go any further rearwards than 55 on the front, 45 on the rear in these LMP1 cars, and wouldn't want to go any further forwards than at about 60, maybe 62 on the front, and 40 or 30 8 on the rear. So it will alter the behaviour of the car on the brakes and coming off the brakes and into the corners. Obviously, the more rearwards you have it, the more trail braking you can do. The less work the front tyres have to do when you start to demand some turning input from them as well as braking input. So you'll want your brake bias not quite always to the very front.
Sorry, Yorkie.
And yeah, there was a Porsche just having a slightly awkward rejoin there. That's okay. Slightly brown pants moment. And yeah, I did get an apology for it, and obviously, as I said, as you heard, slightly scary moment, but nothing too major, didn't really affect me too much. So yeah, no harm, no foul there. But now getting caught up a little bit behind this Porsche 911 RSR in front of us, coming through the Ascari chicane. But as always, doing the passing on the straights, not through the corners, minimising the risk. The main focus is to make it to the end of the race, especially if I can get a podium as well, that I'm kind of potentially sat in and around at the moment. As Berserker is into the pit lane, so this is pretty key now to see where he will come out in relation to me, and there he is actually coming out of the pit lane. So we're going to come out ahead of Berserker, although he does have a pit stop in hand, obviously, as I'm still yet to serve my second pit stop, whereas he has now done so. So we're up in the second, relatively momentarily, as Berserker is under 2 seconds behind, so I imagine that he'll probably close up relatively quickly. So up onto the back of another Audi here, but this is some lap traffic, so they'll need to move out of the way relatively soon, but obviously they're going to be keen to try and get past this LMP2 car as soon as they possibly can. So I'm just going to sit in behind and follow them through. As there the Audi goes. And there I go, past the LMP2, and I should be able to get the GTE, yep, before the Ascari chicane, and actually the LMP2 car's going down the inside of the GTE. That could potentially be a little bit distracting for Berserker, which obviously works into my favour. Allows you to maybe extend the gap a little bit. Coming through the chicane there. Indeed, the gap is now up over 2.5 seconds. And Lucas is now into the pit lane, as we can see, up in the top left as well. So now I'm going to be taking over the race lead. 19.5 litres of fuel in the tank. Getting the slipstream off the Corvette there. Car breaking away a little bit from me under braking. As the Audi now moves over to the left hand side of the circuit to let me on through. So yeah, now into the race lead once again, which is pretty good. 35 minutes remaining. Obviously I've got one more stop to go. Berserker 3 seconds behind, so not really going to be anywhere near him after my pit stop. So definitely going to lose the race lead here. Endless is 22 seconds behind me, so things could be relatively close there. Lucas hasn't come out of the pit lane yet. Well, actually no, scratch that. He has now come out of the pit lane. He's just over 27 seconds behind. And again, running a little bit wide there off the exit of the second Lesmo corner, and lifting off just to make sure I don't get the slowdown penalty. I want to avoid getting any time penalties if I possibly can. Not only for covering my own back if the post-race stewards decide to take a look at the replay and double check to see if anyone was abusing track limits and kind of getting away with it and not getting anything from the in-game system, but also to avoid the time penalty, which could potentially affect the results come the end of the race. So you only get your time penalties removed if you've got a very legitimate reason for being innocent and accidentally picking up a time penalty, such as basically being forced off of the track to avoid someone spinning or crashing and gaining a position from it. So those do get removed post-race if you do go and take those to the stewards. As yeah, you're kind of innocent in that kind of situation. There's not really anything you could have done really. It's a bit unfair to potentially force you to have to give a position back, especially if you do still have a portion of your car on the track and the game still comes up with the instruction to give the position back anyway. So now we want to try and push a little bit, obviously working our way through the traffic. Want to try and minimise the amount of time lost spent behind them going through the corners, so we're making pretty good short work of them at this stage at the moment. Wanting to try and extend the gap to Berserker if I possibly can. Try and see if I can hold Endless off, and also, most importantly, get that gap to Lucas as well. He is the main one that I'm actually fighting in this race, as well as my teammate as well. My teammate's 41 seconds off the back of me, and also has a penalty there. So just a quick double check of the fuel load, just making sure that it's all good. We're still in the right region in terms of the amount of fuel that we're going to be taking for the race. That we're going to have about 2 litres of fuel to spare once we come out of the pit lane. Just basically the way that I'm setting it up with the ICM menu there. Things are all looking good in that regard at the moment. Nice gap to the Porsche here, so I should be able to accelerate off the corner reasonably well. Not using the full width of the track just to make sure I'm not sending any mixed signals to that Porsche, and I am going to be passing on his right hand side, which will allow him to stay left on the racing line. The next car in front of me is an MP2 car. He's about 19 seconds up the road, so now is a good time to really try and push, see if we can bang in a couple of good quick lap times, especially on this lower fuel as well. But Berserker is there lurking behind, about 1.5 seconds off the tail of my Toyota.
Holy shit!
Someone having a slight scare there in the Discord. I do apologise for any colourful language that you guys hear. I do know that there's a few younger viewers and a few people do like to sit and watch with their families, so I do apologise for that. Obviously the people that I'm racing with aren't always necessarily aware that other people are recording every word and aren't able to edit that out. And obviously heat of the moment sort of thing as well. People sometimes say things that they don't necessarily mean to say. Good smooth run there. This lap is looking very, very good so far.
There's an LMP1 car driving without lights on.
Really doing a good fine job of making this potentially my fastest lap of the race so far. We got a reasonable run through the final turn, but as you saw was shy from the apex. Didn't really get the run through and lost a little bit of time. As you can see, dropped about 0.5 seconds in total, because it was 2 temps up and then ended up about 2-3 temps, best part of, down after the final corner. Still, that's a pretty reasonable lap. We've got the gap to Berserker back up over 2 seconds, which is nice. Gap to Lucas is now over 33.5 seconds, so that is looking really good there. He's lost a whole chunk of time to me somewhere along the line, probably through traffic or maybe a potential slight mistake as well. Endless, the gap is 26.5 seconds, so again I think that may potentially for him will come through traffic. So traffic kind of working out in my favour this time round, because we did not too long ago, a couple of laps ago, pass through a whole bunch of cars just probably what those drivers were coming up to and probably weren't quite able to work through it as easily and as quickly as I was. Fortunately for me, the time just fell very nicely into place. I was able to pass the majority of them on the straights without really losing any time in the corners. So we slip up underneath the Porsche. Coming onto the start-finish straight. Again, another pretty solid, reasonable lap time. Mid 29, sorry. 29.6.
LMP1s, I recommend you stopping this dive. Maybe suddenly next time I will just turn.
And now we've got a gap to about 3.5 seconds to Berserker, so certainly making some headway here. 9.5 litres of fuel remaining though. And we're now into the final half hour of the race as well. Slight lock up there on the inside left. Sent me a little bit deeper than I would have liked to have been coming into the second chicane, and you can see that's costing me about half a second already so far on this lap in comparison to my fastest, so definitely not ideal there. Very good smooth run through the final corner, really able to hook up the apex quite nicely. Now coming up to a couple of back markers, kind of sat lurking to the middle and right side of the circuit, so we'll pop past them relatively easy. Again, just
slow down, watch out.
Double check of the fuel load here with the ICM menu, making sure that I've got 2 litres more than the game is suggesting that I actually need. Actually giving myself a little bit of a safety buffer, which is, well, as we saw from qualifying, just about able to make a lap on 2 litres of fuel. And that was when I was pushing hard without lifting and coasting, and obviously being able to lift and coast a little bit allow me to use that if I need to. Actually down in the bottom right hand corner of the display that is there on the wheel, you can see the fuel usage. So my last lap I used 1.96 litres of fuel, and my current average that I'm using per lap is 1.92 litres. Oh, as I get caught up behind the Porsche there on the exit, that's some damage to the front of my car, both suspension and also aero damage. Sorry, Cornwall.
Okay.
Kind of felt that was slightly my fault, slightly his, but that's definitely not ideal, and it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to reach the higher top speeds. Now we're going to have to go into the race management and double check our settings here. So I'm switching the damage to repair the aero damage, because I can tell that I'm down on top speed on the straight as there is more drag. I can see that I've got 2% suspension damage on the front right, but that's not really going to be too bad. That I can work with for the remainder of the race. It's just that 12% front aero damage, and here you can see the major difference that it actually has as Berserker's closing up quite easily on the run towards the second chicane. So just that slight momentary lapse in judgment and slight mistake, it's really costing me here, especially as I was doing pretty well to extend the gap to the other drivers that I'm competing with. And here comes Berserker on my right hand side. There he is, look. He's got that slight straight line speed advantage that I don't have. I have to tuck in behind him coming into the Ascari chicane here. Though he hasn't really had the tidiest of runs, but neither have I in the dirty air. So now I've got 4.6 litres of fuel remaining. 4.5. So almost get awkwardly caught up with a Ford GT there at the apex, and now I'm going to dive into the pit lane to get that damage repaired. Nullify the effect that it's been having on me. Just one final check of the pit strategy, making sure I've got those 2 litres to play with. I've got the damage set to repair the aero damage at the front of the car as we come and stop in the box. Not going to be taking tyres this time. So fuel load going in, the final stop of the race that I'll be needing to make. This should see me to the end of the race quite easily. And then just a quick repair of the front nose to get that aero damage repaired, and we're back underway again. As you can see, we've dropped behind Lucas. The question is, how close is worn tyre going to be to me? Now we get underway, using all the hybrid energy to accelerate up to racing speed before getting hard on the brakes for that first chicane. Worn tyre, my teammate is about 2-3 seconds off the back of myself, but I think he's gone and made a mistake coming into that first chicane, so he's going to drop a little bit further back, as we can see, to just under 6 seconds. And I'm now 45.5 seconds off the race lead. Probably would have been about 35 seconds off the race lead, so I probably would have only been a couple of seconds off the back of Lucas if I didn't pick up that damage. Didn't have the subsequent lap time lost, and also obviously the repair time in the pit lane as well. So I would have only needed to have taken fuel. As you can see, didn't take tyres in that stop. So quite a dramatic turn to the race there for me. It's kind of messed things up and put me on the back foot a little bit. But the question is, with Lucas about 13 seconds up the road, are we able to close in on him and do something about getting a podium here at Monza for this opening round? That would be an ideal start to the beginning of the championship. I know that I'm safe on fuel for the remainder of the race, so I don't need to worry about that. I can just focus on pushing and trying to close that gap down. Just obviously have to try and work the traffic in the right way, pick the right moments to make the passes, and try and work through it as quickly and as effectively as possible. Let's go and catch the orange sausage curve there. Flicks the car up into the air. And we've got Porsche here in front of us, and I'm probably a little bit closer than I would actually like to be as he goes and catches the curve. Do have to lift out of the accelerator a little bit there, just hesitate getting on the throttle.
Nice job.
And accelerating off the corner.
I like that one. Fucking hell.
Again, apologies for the language. Something obviously interesting happening on track somewhere around. It's BMW kind of straddling the curb there, coming through Ascari. Corvette moving out the way, pulling out of his slipstream, kind of giving me the slipstream a little bit. Just threading my way between the two cars.
4 wheels, please. Anytime, like. Fucking hell.
Now I keep on pushing. Good thing is a lot of these cars were catching on the straights, which is good for us. Worn tyres, not too far behind. He's within 2 seconds. Got a car coming out of the pit lane, but we'll pass him before getting to the braking zone for turn 1. So now it's just a case of focusing on hooking up all the apexes, trying to run clean, consistent laps. Let's close that gap down. And if we can drag worn tyre with us up towards the back of Lucas as well, that'll be ideal. The gap is still in and around 13 odd seconds at the moment. Judging by the delta up in the top left, is once again I go and catch the curve, and also that second curve on the inside. Really not ideal. And that's cost me a whole bunch of time, as you can see. We're now 9/10 to a second off of previous fastest, as one of the Audis goes and catches the inside curb through the second Lesmo corner. Give him plenty of breathing room off the exit there, just in case he ended up losing control over on the gravel and ended up spinning back across the circuit. Now worn tyre He's right on my tail, half a second off. He was showing some very good pace earlier on in the race, so there is a possibility here of letting Warntire go through and using his pace to try and close up onto the guys in front, as Berserker is now into the pit lane once again for a third pit stop, it would seem. Where is he going to come out in relation to us? And we're actually going to end up passing Berserker. So we're now back up into P3. Warntire's just presenting himself in the mirror a little bit, coming into the first chicane. But yeah, Warntire having to make a third pit stop. So obviously, well, actually, I think that was his fourth pit stop because I think he made 2 earlier on. So obviously didn't get the fuel that he needed for the remainder of the race and decided to pit in order to get that fuel on board, as we have a pretty hairy moment there and almost lose the rear end of the car coming into the second chicane. Seems like Warntire didn't have the tidiest of corners either, so he's not close enough to really threaten me coming in through the Lesmo corners. Taking a look up in the top left hand corner, the deltas were now 10 seconds there or thereabouts off the back of Lucas, so we're closing up in on him, which is good news. Just need to keep that gap continuously coming down over the last quarter of an hour of this race that remains.
Ooh, that was close. Watch it one day.
Brilliant. Thanks for that.
Reckon we're talking?
So still 10 seconds between myself and Lucas. We've now actually got him on the relative board down in the bottom left as well. He is the next car that is immediately in front of us, which is good. Gives me some further encouragement and some inspiration to keep on really pushing to try and bring that gap down even more. Warntire still hanging with us at the moment, about second half off the rear of my car. See the distant tail lights of Lucas there in front of us as he's just coming off towards turn 3. We can try and see if we can keep ourselves in the 29s, especially in and around the mid 29s. Seems like the pace that we need to be setting in order to keep bringing this gap down.
It's close.
Stop chatting, guys.
Now Lucas has got a couple of cars between himself and us. One GTE, one LMP2 car. Really chucking it into the final turn there. Really trying to lean on the aerodynamics of the car to get us through the corner as quickly as possible. Gap seems to be in around 8.5 seconds now, so we're taking a good 1.5 seconds, but we're now coming up underneath the Porsche, coming into the first chicane here, which isn't going to be ideal, not being able to quite take in the speed in towards the apex that I would like to. Although the apex speeds would be fairly similar, it's just the LMP cars can take a little bit more speed actually going in towards the apex. Use the aerodynamics to help turn the car in, slow it down a bit as the car gets very sideways on the entrance to the second chicane there. Just about managed to gather it back up. Oh, getting caught slightly there underneath the Ford GT, which wouldn't be ideal, but even still, it looks like we managed to get the gap down to about 7 seconds to Lucas, so we're still closing up onto the back of him, which is good. Looking at the fuel average down the bottom right of the display, 1.93 litres, things still look to be pretty good there, especially as I've got the 2 additional litres of fuel just in case I need it as well. Now one tyre is starting to come up me a little bit there, coming off the corner. Did save the hybrid a little bit. It's allowed me to be a little bit defensive and kind of nullify the acceleration that he had off the corner. Just getting the slipstream off of me. With these tyres wearing down, starting to lose a little bit of grip as well. I'm not going to do the obvious pun. Did think about it, but I thought that would be absolutely terrible of me and no one would forgive me for that. Now we've got an LMP2 and a GTE car here in front of us, so we want to try and clear these guys as quickly as possible. There's a space between the two. Let's thread the needle on the hybrid and slip on through that. Not going to be able to get this BMW before the Ascari chicane though, so let's drag the brake and grab a whole bunch of hybrid energy to use coming off the corner. Worn tyres now right there behind me as I go and catch the curb a little bit awkwardly, coming out through the exit of the Ascari chicane. For a moment I thought that worn tyre was going to go for the pass, which is why I moved all the way over to the left hand side to kind of facilitate a 3 wide as he disappeared from the rear camera monitor that's there on the at the top of the screen, and now I can hear and tell that he is there alongside me getting the drive off the final corner. So we're side by side in this drag race, almost catching the grass there, which kind of forced me to flinch to the right slightly, which forced him to flinch to the right, and I thought it would just be a better idea to let worn tyre go, him take the position, and let's use each other, not fight each other, to try and close up onto the back of Lucas in front. Worn tyre seems to be showing that he's got the pace. Eyes forward, boy. And there I was, just letting him know to not worry about me behind, just focus on looking ahead and trying to close that gap down to Lucas, as I'm just going to sit him behind and not try to hustle or overtake him. Don't really want to distract him in any way, so just giving him that little message to keep his eyes forward, allow him to push on and focus. Although he looked like he had a slightly slow exit there coming off the second Desmo, but still, just going to slide him behind for the moment, let him run the pace, see what we can do in terms of closing up, because I know if I can stick with worn tyre to the end and we do both manage to catch Lucas, that's going to be both of us up onto the podium if we can both get past Lucas, and then once we're both on the podium, depending on the position that we're in, we may be able to have a little bit of a teammate fight for that second step, but obviously a podium result would be more ideal, the two of us working together. It'd be good for the team championship. Be a pretty good start for the team championship, so much rather get the team points rather than the outright result, especially if he's got the 37-second penalty there as well. It's taking on another 5 seconds somewhere along the line. So I may end up potentially inheriting the penalty, the position anyway, through his penalty. So yeah, I don't want to be distracting him too much and potentially force him into an error, especially as we're into the final 10 minutes as well. So just going to stick with him for the moment. Keep hunting down Lucas. Close that gap. It's around about 6 seconds at the moment. Do have a few cars to navigate in terms of the traffic. Losing the car there. Under braking, just about managed to get it slowed down. Slight lock up under braking, bit of a four-wheel drift. Had to kind of steer out of the corner. But yeah, we did manage to get the car slowed down still. So we're now coming up to a back marker. Hopefully they move out of the way relatively quickly, which they do. It's good, ideal for both of us. Keep pushing on as the gap now down to around 4 seconds to Lucas in front, so things are looking very positive at this stage in these final few laps. 6.5 minutes remaining. Tyre goes a little bit deep there. It's going to hold me up a little bit on the exit. It's not ideal. It's not what we really want here. Got a slightly better run than him coming off the corner as well. Used a little bit more hybrid, so I'm now on his outside. We are side by side here. Coming into the second chicane. I do really want to lose too much time then. I think with him being on the back foot, he was going to be the one giving me the position and letting me run ahead. But I want to let him go back through again, because I know that despite that slight mistake from him, he's obviously showing the pace to be able to close up to the back of Lucas in front. It just needs to avoid making the mistakes. Dragging the brake here into the final turn, build up that hybrid, which we shall use coming off the final corner now. That will allow us to close up the lost ground. Now with the slipstream as well. Just dabbing the brake, making sure that I'm keeping my distance as to not distract warm tyre too much coming into the first chicane. They seem to be a little bit loose there coming off the exit. Slight kick up of dirt from him, but didn't really have to eat that, which is good. Tiniest brushes of both orange curbs there. Didn't want to run out wide. Had a little bit more front wash than I was expecting. one tyre going a little bit wide, so use a little bit of the hybrid to lip on past him.
Crazy legs, Podbuster.
Yeah, that was a mad lag, so I don't know what. Jesus.
And now it's going to be my turn to try and see if I can push onto the back of Lucas. And my teammate one tyre's gone and dived into the pit lane. And as obviously the race has been and gone in the past, I know, well, now know, I didn't know at the time, but he was actually pitting for fuel. He didn't quite have enough fuel to make it to the end, so he's having to pit to make a quick splash and dash. So that has pretty much secured us for third position, and he has managed to just about, I think, maybe get himself. No, he's just lost the position to Berserker, but he's come out of the pit lane right in and around him, I think. But we can see Lucas there. That is the car. He is the car in front, 2 seconds up the road. So closing in on him quite easily. This Warn tyre is now out of the pit lane. He has lost the position to Berserker, but Endless is now into the pit lane as well. So he's obviously not had the fuel to make it to the end of the races and having to make a quick splash and dash in order to see himself to the finish, which is, yeah, it's going to make it really, really tight when he comes out of the pit lane as well, whether I'm going to be able to actually leapfrog him into the final 2 minutes. And Lucas has gone into the pit lane too. Lucas has also run out of fuel, or near enough, doesn't have enough fuel to actually make it to the end, and I've gone and taken the lead because of both of those drivers having to go in for their splash and dashes just to make it for the final 1 minute and 20 odd seconds. Obviously once the countdown timer reaches 0, that is going to be the last lap of the race, so you still have to complete that lap, but still that's going to put me out now in the race lead. I've still got over 5.5 litres of fuel, so I'm still all good there in order to make it to the end of the race. And Endless is about 3.5 seconds or so off the back of my car. But the race strategy really hasn't worked for Lucas or Endless there, of having to make an emergency pit stop. Just a unfortunate thing, miscalculation, I think, possibly with their pit strategies. Just didn't take enough fuel on board, where obviously we know that I was being relatively safe and taking roughly about 2 extra litres to make sure that I actually get to the end. I can't really quite fully relax with Endless lurking not too far behind me. But this is actually going to be the final lap of the race, as we're coming up to, well, we're in the final 10 seconds coming into the last corner. So the countdown time is going to reach 0 midway through the final turn here, which means that I'll now be coming across the finish line. I would have had enough fuel to go another lap anyway, but I'm going to come across the finish line in P1 to take my first ever win in official league racing. I've had wins in practice races and I've had podiums, but I've never had an official race win in a racing league. So this is a fantastic feeling to get this result. Kind of lucked into it with the other drivers not having enough fuel for their final stint of the race, but obviously it's better to be safe than sorry and make sure you have enough fuel in order to get to the finish of the race in these endurance races. And what a dream start to the championship, coming away with the maximum number of points that I could have possibly taken. Teammate Warn Tyre does get 5th position in the end, but yeah, that is 10 points going to me for that result there. Very, very happy. There is the official standings as well, so obviously you can see in the LMP1 class that myself got the win. Endless was in 2nd, Berserker 3rd, Lucas came home in 4th, my teammate Warn Tyre was there in 5th, Lama in 6th, 7th was Bazanchek, Spudbuster in 8th, and then Nunu came home in 9th position in the end. And that is going to be it for this video as well. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. And make sure, if you're new here, to subscribe to the channel, especially if you enjoyed this video and you want to see me continue on throughout the championship. Then hit that subscribe button with the bell notification. That way you'll be alerted as to when I put any new videos up on the channel. But thank you very much for watching this one. Hopefully I shall catch you very, very soon. But until the next time, have fun, stay safe, and take care.